Hey, welcome. Dr. Qaali Hussein here, trauma surgeon, mom of 6, and the creator of Taking Up Space, a masterclass on defying the norm and setting your own standards. What exactly is taking up space? So the motivation behind the creation of this channel and the masterclass, Taking Up Space, came from my own experience of pursuing surgery as a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, who also has a very strong maternal instinct and wanted to have a lot of kids. So to give you a little bit of background about me, I'm originally from Somalia. I've always been interested in medicine and eventually became interested in the field of surgery. And so one of the things along my journey is the persistent message that I've always received, which was that as a Muslim woman who chose to wear a hijab, that surgery was not right for me. And that if I wanted to pursue surgery, I would have to compromise my identity. And I would have to compromise the fact that I wanted to practice wearing the hijab. When I went through and finished, all the requirements and actually got into the field of medicine and specifically the field of surgery, the same message, kept persisting, and the hijab was always a problem. And then I became a mother. I became pregnant with my first child as an intern, which is the first year of residency after medical school. And at that point, in a program that really didn't have a maternity leave policy because none of the women ever got pregnant, the response was, now that you're a mother, obviously surgery is not right for you, and therefore you should look at more family-friendly fields, such as family medicine or internal medicine, or just take a year off and decide what you really want to do with your life. Didn't really matter the fact that I still wanted to be a surgeon despite being a mother. And so, in this environment, in this professional environment where, it's really, the lifestyle was very difficult as a surgery resident, and then now with the, compounded with the, constant negativity, and, being a mother and having to deal with that extra responsibility, it became very difficult to deal with all the stress. And, I was blessed to have a lot of family support, a husband who's very supportive. So I had that to lean on. But from a professional standpoint, I had to figure out a lot of the ways to maneuver through the system on my own. So one of the things that I have taken away from it, having finished my training and being in practice for several years now, is that the system is very flawed, right? So the system is not designed for women. It's not designed very well for women, and it's definitely not designed for women with intersectional identities, right? I was Muslim, I'm Black, you wear a hijab, and then I decided to have a bunch of babies, right? In a very male-dominated field. So one of the things I started doing after I finished my training and established myself in my practice and became comfortable as an attending surgeon is, this system is something that needs to be addressed, right? The system, how exclusionary things are. We have a movement right now, and it's been going on for quite some time, of improving diversity and inclusion in the field of medicine, as well as many fields in STEM. So what I have seen personally is the fact that yes, we do say that we want diversity and inclusion, but in practice, what we are doing is we're practicing exclusion, right? There are exclusionary practices in these institutions and in these fields. And it's not just in medicine, where we say we want diversity, but we bring diverse people into an institution that is not equipped to accommodate them, that is not equipped to make them feel welcome and make them feel comfortable. And as soon as they start, advocating for changes or asking for accommodations, our first go-to is, there's the door, right? It remains exclusionary. So what exactly is taking up space? What does it mean to take up space? So one of the things that I want to emphasize, and what we actually do not, speak up about in medicine, and in many of these fields, is, it's okay to remain your authentic self. It's okay to advocate for yourself. It's okay to ask for accommodations. But, those things are much easier said than done. And a lot of it has to do with, knowing how to maneuver through the system, knowing, which battles to fight, and which ones may not be as helpful for you to take on early on in your training or in your career. A lot of it has to do with negotiating change, right? Not in the sense of negotiating a contract, but negotiating change in a system, taking up an issue, taking the right steps, approaching people the right way to say, I need this policy to be written so that, myself and those who follow me can, feel accommodated. Example, when I was in medical school, I wasn't allowed to come to the operating room because of my hijab. Why? Because they've never had any student that wore hijab, so therefore a policy was never needed. And as being the first person, the answer was no, you don't belong, right? A lot of times we look at that and say, okay, that's the final answer. But there are things that you can do within the system to say, you know what, nope, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. We're gonna, take some steps, we're gonna take some actions to improve the system so that I am welcome and I can come in here. Yes, we need to stay within the realms of, protecting patients from infections and things like that. But my hijab will be incorporated into this field that has never encountered it, right? It takes a little bit of work to change these systems, but if we have the right tools and the right approaches, we can change these systems to be more inclusive and to be more accommodating, not only for us, but for those who follow us. Some of the issues that women and many underrepresented minorities will face include discrimination. Sometimes it's blatant. Sometimes it's in your face, and other times it's implicit, it's implied, right? It's implied that becoming a mother doesn't, you're no longer fit to be a surgeon. It's implied that because of your hijab, you won't be able to make it in a male-dominated field. So how do you navigate that? How do you choose which acts of discrimination to speak up against and say this is unacceptable, and which ones do you shrug off and say, what, it's not worth my time or energy to deal with this because I have a bigger goal. So a lot of that takes into account problem-solving strategies, right? How do you maneuver through the system strategically, right? Nobody has taught me how to do this, and a lot of it I had to figure out for myself. And it was, and the lessons learned were quite painful. There were a lot of times where, they came with agony and tears, and, thank God for the support of family, just talking it out to say, okay, what can I do? What can I do differently? What can I do better? And, in the end, I realized that there are a lot of things that I beat myself up about a lot. That I probably didn't need to. There are things that I probably could have ignored and say, what, this is not worth my time or energy, and I can focus on other more important things. So that's one of the things that I want to focus on is, there's so much angst and there's so much pressure being, having this expectation of, you're basically expected to fail, right? That was my entire training up until I was a fellow applying for my board certifications. The expectations was that I fail. And when I, stated that I, passed with with the first try, it was a surprise that I did well, right? Because the bar is set so low for us. So the reason I created, this masterclass, and the reason I'm creating this YouTube channel, is because how we approach this needs to be completely different, right? I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of having to respond to every single feedback, having to respond to the negativity, right? So what I hope to do with this, Taking Up Masterclass, is to kind of step back and take a look at the big picture, and take a look at, how we approach, going into these male-dominated fields, whether it's, medicine, law, engineering, any field out in the corporate world, right? Any field where, as a woman, as a intersectional woman with many, different identities, how do you go into it strategically? Not always having to, make excuses for why you're being treated the way you're being treated, or, not always, going into this, in self-defense mode, always having to, defend your actions and defend everything you say. Instead, what I want to do is create, a strategic way of, grounding yourself in your values and your principles, right? Going in and basically, with a mindset of, you're going in here to accomplish something, and you're, focused on that goal, and you realize that all the noise that comes at you, all the feedback, all the discrimination, all the sexism, all the all the racial bias that comes your way, you put it in its boxes and say, you know what, this is because of that, and you don't internalize that. You don't, beat yourself up about why, someone is, somebody is treating you a certain way because of their sexism, right? Because of their racism. What we do is we internalize it, and it affects us, and it affects our mental health. How do you compartmentalize that? How do you, look at that for what it is and say, you know what, that is a you problem. It's not a me problem, it's a you problem. And you keep focusing and working towards your goal, and you are strategic about which battles you pick and which battles you say, you know what, this is not a me problem, this is a you problem, and you keep moving without it affecting you on an emotional level. And after that, after we've, you establish that you ground yourself in your values and your principles, and you're focused on your goal, how do we move away from always having to fight racism, to fight sexism, to fight, all these isms? And how do you focus on your growth? How do you focus on your professional development? How do you focus on networking with the right people, finding your tribe, finding, the like-minded people, right? I recently did many interviews, and I had people, as soon as they heard that I had 6 kids, didn't want to have anything to do with me, didn't want to call me, didn't want to answer my emails, didn't want to engage in employing me as a surgeon, right? If it was back then, I would have felt terrible to say, you know what, that speaks ill of my skills as a surgeon. But you know what, I looked at it from the standpoint of, you know what, if they don't value me as a surgeon, and they see, the fact that I have a family as baggage, then they don't deserve me, right? We need to value ourselves as a whole. We need to bring ourselves to the table as our authentic selves. Because when we do that, that is when we're able to truly enjoy our work. And we can save ourselves from the burnout of always having to defend our mere existence. So the essence of taking up space is essentially, being comfortable enough to be your authentic self and bring your authentic self to the table. and thrive in this environment, in that type of environment. And when you identify things that are not congruent with your values and your principles, that you can speak up against it and you can push back and you can advocate for yourself. And when you identify that your values and other people's values don't align, that you're able to articulate that and see it for what it is, that it's not a failure on you, but just a discordance of values, and that it says nothing about you or your skills or your knowledge. So welcome again to Taking Up Space with Dr. Qaali Hussein, where we will defy the norm and set our own standards. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave comments below and tell me what taking up space means to you.